Okay, we want to look a little bit at human impacts on the ocean. Let's start out talking about aquaculture. This is essentially fish farming, which is the growing of aquatic organisms for human consumption. And this can take place in either fresh or marine water. Highly developed countries harvest more from the open ocean, while developing nations harvest more as a result of aquaculture. The reason for this is the abundant supply of cheap labor. There's a limit to the harvest, which is the area that's available for farming. Fish farms generally have dense populations and a lot of polluting waste. They also cause a net loss of wild fish because raised fish tend to be carnivorous. Ocean ranching is essentially deep water offshore aquaculture. It doesn't harm the coastline, but there's less oversight in these types of facilities. And here we can see a look at an underwater fish farm. Cobia are raised in a deep water cage off of Puerto Rico. The open ocean circulation reduces the waste problems that are common in shallow water aquaculture. Now keep in mind that you can also have aquaculture inland. You can do it completely terrestrially with aquariums and with the proper filtration units and waste removal and again proper conditions created for the species that you're looking to farm. And this has the least impact on aquatic ecosystems because it's completely removed from the marine or freshwater environment. This represents a way to supply the world's need for this important food resource without substantially harming the deep water and freshwater ecosystems. Other impacts on the ocean include shipping, ocean dumping, and plastic debris. Millions of ships dump oil ballast and waste and other byproducts. MARPOL bans marine pollution from the shipping industry, however, it's not well enforced. The Open Dumping Ban Act is used by cities which used to dump sewage into the ocean, and this produced disease-causing organisms that contaminated the shellfish. So this was a way to curb this practice. Plastic waste is a problem. It collects in ocean gyres and in freshwater ecosystems. It doesn't degrade at any appreciable rate. It simply breaks up into smaller pieces. The Pacific Garbage Patch, as of 2009, was 2 times the size of Texas. The plastic pieces can entangle marine mammals and birds, and filter feeders can ingest the plastic pieces, which are carriers of polychlorinated biphenyls, which, again, are known carcinogens. And here's a look at a piece of the Pacific Garbage Patch. So one of the proposed solutions, which we talked about in class, was the use of an ocean-going array in order to harvest these floating garbage patches, rescue the plastic, and then use it for recycling. There's an excellent paper that I'll post on Blackboard that talks a little bit about this array, its proposed drawbacks, and its proposed benefits. There's also coastal development to consider. This alters or destroys coastal ecosystems. For example, it can have a negative impact on mangroves, salt marshes, seagrass, beds, and coral reefs. Coastal areas become overdeveloped, they get highly polluted, and they become overfished. Coastal management plans are inadequate for this problem. The biggest problem is human population size. 60% of the world's population lives within 93 miles of coastline. As much as 75% are predicted to live within this range by 2025. And again, that's going off of current numbers. There's also human impacts on coral reefs. 25% of the world's corals are at high risk. There's silt washing downstream from clear-cut forests, which is smothering the reefs, and there's high salinity that comes from freshwater diversion projects. Overfishing of top predators is also going to have a negative effect on the ecosystem, as will damage by tourists. Also, pollution from ocean dumping and coastal pollution can kill a lot of the coral and their associated members of the food web within this particular ecosystem. Bleaching results from stressed corals that have experienced now a decrease in the ocean's pH. This is called ocean acidification, and as a result, they expel their zooxanthellae and effectively degrade. And so what you're looking at here is an example of how coral reefs are formed and how they're degraded. And this is basically detailing the effect of ocean warming and its connection to coastal bleaching. On the left, you see bleached coral off the coast of Panama. Scientists have linked this to ocean warming. Warmer than usual temperatures stress the coral animals, causing them to lose their zooxanthellae. Without these accompanying algae, these photosynthetic organisms, the corals can't get enough food, and as a result, they die. On the right, you see an evaluation of more than 5 million temperature profiles between 1950 and 55, which indicate that the ocean is warmed. Most of the warming has occurred in shallow waters where the corals live, and as a result has the greatest impact on their numbers. Other human impacts on the ocean include offshore extraction of mineral and energy resources. There's large deposits of minerals on the ocean floor. Examples include manganese nodules. Mining these would adversely affect sea life, and the market value would not cover the expense of mining. There's disputes over deposits under international waters because they don't belong to any one particular country. And then, of course, there's petroleum, which is a major source of energy because of its high concentration of carbon-hydrogen bonds. It's the most energy-rich component that we can extract from the ocean floor. However, it is a major threat to the fisheries. And here you can see some of these manganese nodules we were discussing earlier. These potato-sized nodules have enticed miners, but it isn't yet commercially feasible to obtain them. Other impacts include climate change. We have an incomplete understanding of climate change, and as a result, we aren't sure what the effects will be long term. There could be a disruption in the ocean conveyor belt, which transports heat around the globe, or climate warming could shut down the conveyor belt within a decade. This could cause major cooling in Europe and major warming in other parts of the world. As a result, we wouldn't sequester as much carbon dioxide into the ocean, which would lead to more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which could trigger more warming, which could further weaken the belt. This is one possibility. So we get to our next set of concept checks. What are some of the harmful environmental effects associated with the fishing industry and with aquaculture? The most serious effects associated with the fishing industry is overharvesting. At present, 75% of the world's fish stocks are considered fully exploited, overexploited, or depleted. Fish populations take many years to rebound if they recover at all. Moreover, every year nearly 30 million tons of bycatch is dumped into the oceans. Most of these organisms are dead or near death upon return to the ocean. While aquaculture may seem like a harmless alternative to fishing, it causes many harmful environmental effects if it's conducted within the aquatic ecosystem. For example, waste pollution of adjacent waters harms nearby species, the genetic diversity of wild populations of fish could be diminished, and wild species may be outcompeted by introduced organisms, and damage to the coastline could also result. The next question, how does widespread use of plastics contribute to ocean pollution? Well, plastics pose a threat to the health of our oceans. Because they don't biodegrade at any appreciable rate, they remain in our oceans indefinitely. Plastics need sunlight in order to photodegrade so that when huge quantities of trash containing plastics are released into the ocean, they could remain there forever and lethally harm organisms that they come into contact with. Next question, how might the effect of global climate change on the ocean alter the global climate? Well, global climate change in the ocean could alter the global climate by disrupting the ocean's conveyor belt. As a result, this could disrupt the transport of heat around the globe. Specifically, Europe would encounter major cooling, while other continents would experience greater climatic warming. So how do we address these problems? We're going to describe international initiatives that address problems in the global ocean. and will explain the goals associated with correcting the ocean's problems in the future. These problems are complex, and as a result, they're going to require complex solutions. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which was drafted in '94, has 157 countries that have ratified protecting the ocean resources. The UN Fish Stocks Agreement, which was drafted in '95, regulates marine fishing, while Fishery and Conservation Management Act, drafted in '77, has been essential to protecting fish habitats for over 600 species. It requires that we reduce overfishing, rebuild populations, and minimize the bycatch. It also sets fishing quotas, restrictions on fishing gear, and limits on the number of fishing boats. It also requires closure of fisheries during spawning. Future actions. The U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy's 2004 report was utilized to create a new ocean policy in order to improve the decision-making process. It required that we consolidate agencies and strengthen science and generate information for decision makers. As a result, this requires a need for high-quality research. It also called for enhancing ocean education to instill in citizens a stewardship ethic. Environmental education should be part of the curriculum at all levels, including strong marine components. Other actions include the establishment of no-take reserves, substantial reduction of the fishing fleet, and the removal of subsidies for the fishing industry. It also calls for adopting an ecosystem-based approach to manage the ocean environments. There should be a focus on preserving the health and function of the entire marine ecosystem, and we should establish networks of fully protected marine reserves. Less than 5% of the marine environments have been protected, but those that have been protected have seen great success. And here we can see an example of the location of some of these marine reserves. On the left, fully protected marine reserves can limit destruction to critical habitats such as the Hawaiian breeding grounds of these humpback whales shown in the lower left. And on the right, we see a map of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association's national marine sanctuaries, indicated again by the yellow dots in the figure in the upper right. So now we move on to a case study. This is the dead zone present in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a result of runoff from the Mississippi River. The runoff contains large amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus. As a result, the algae grow rapidly, and the dead algae sink to the bottom and decompose, and this can deplete the water of oxygen, creating a hypoxic zone. Only anaerobic bacteria can thrive in those conditions. From March to September, it's at its greatest range, whereas it's worst from July, or rather from June to August. Basically, it poses a threat almost half the year. And you can see it indicated here. Here's the Mississippi River. This is the Gulf of Mexico. And this dead zone, again, is created as a result of this runoff. Climate change is making the dead zones worse even without this runoff effect, and it can threaten biodiversity as well as coastal fisheries. And so the result here is the altering of an ecosystem as a result of the activity of man. You can see it here also pictured in this map. This is the coast of Louisiana, and you can see here the dead zone. So we get to our last set of concept checks for the chapter. Which international treaties aim to protect ocean resources? Well, various treaties have been developed in the past 2 decades to help protect these resources. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea focuses on the protection of ocean resources, and the UN Fish Stocks Agreement regulates marine fishing. Next question, what are the main goals recommended by the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy? The 3 main recommendations are to create a new ocean policy to improve decision-making, strengthen science, and generate information for decision makers, and to enhance ocean education in order to instill in citizens the stewardship ethic so that we might minimize man's impact on the marine and freshwater ecosystems. Okay, that brings this chapter to a close. Again, make sure and review this material as it will be covered on the exam, and I'll see everybody in class. Thank you.